once I've picked a property and I've decided on it, what is the process for actually buying it? How, who pays the real estate agent? What are the closing costs? How are they different from the United States? And what are some rules of thumb we should come to understand? And the reason that I ask is I get the sense that versus the real estate market in the US, when you close in Mexico, you need still a pretty good chunk of cash to pay those closing costs. And I think sometimes people are a little surprised about them. So what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, traditionally in Mexico, the buyer pays the closing costs, and the total closing costs average about 5% of the purchase price. Now, in that closing cost, you have not only the notario fees, and the notario is the attorney who is handling the transaction with special licensing and authorization for real estate transactions. And so it's nothing like a public notary in the US. That's just, what the real estate attorney, the title is the notario. His fees are included in that. The title registration fees are included in that. And then the biggest chunk of those closing costs are what are referred to as acquisition tax. And the acquisition tax is about 4% more or less of the purchase price. And so when you're looking at a little over 5% in total closing costs, most of that are the acquisition costs for purchasing the property. And so those are expenses paid by the buyer. The seller pays all of the sales commissions, and then the escrow fee is split 50-50 between the buyer and the seller, because the escrow account benefits both the buyer and the seller.
Let me just give you an example. If you buy a home, say for $200,000, you're looking at closing cost with everything. Everything out the door is probably right around $20,000. Don't hold me to that quote. It could be less, it could be more, depending on areas and depending on what we're looking at. But it wouldn't be substantially more. I mean, we're talking very, very. I mean, that's very close to what it would be for that particular type of loan. One of the things, when people say it is very expensive, they're right. There's a lot of sticker shock to buy a home the first year in Mexico. There's a number of taxes, especially on a purchase. The largest tax you have is an acquisition tax. The acquisition tax can be very high, and then there's taxes on top of that. And so again, all of those culminate into that $20,000 cost. Now on a refinance, you don't need to pay that acquisition tax. So you're saving, thousands of dollars by not paying that acquisition tax. So as bad as that sounds for either a purchase or a refi because of the cost, we also have to look at the second year. From the second year on, the taxes in Mexico, like on that same $200,000 property that I just talked about, the taxes are going to be in the $200 to $300 range. And those are your total taxes per year. And so you're not going to get that, probably not going to get it anywhere in the United States. I mean, I dealt in all 50 states, and I've never seen taxes that low from the second year on. And so, and then if you pay the taxes at a certain time, you pay in the first quarter of the year, specifically in January, you're going to save 20% on top of that. So now your taxes are only $240 per se on that property. So you look at things like that. So really, the Mexican government's getting everything up front. They're getting the taxes up front. You're going to absorb all the costs really up front. But if you look at the return on investment, which is what we do for every client, the return on investment is actually really, really good after like the third year.
I know you said earlier in our interview that one thing people need to be aware of is that just the time to purchase a home takes a lot longer in Mexico than it does in the US. Can you just give us a sense of how long that process will take?
Yeah. So you're looking at 60 to 90 days before you close on a property. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The reason it takes 60 to 90 days is there's a lot of checks, rechecks, and checks and balances that take place. We'll go in, we'll do a title search just like you do in the US. We'll have title insurance just like you have in the US. But at the same time, there's a number of things that are done in Mexico that make it a very, you know, just make it a very smart move to make sure that it's done. For example, we get a certificate of no liens. We make sure that there's no liens on the property with the government. And so if something comes up after that, we can look back on that and say there were no liens. We look at the certificate of utilities. We look at how the utilities are brought into the property. Does somebody else own the utilities? Do you own the utilities? How is the water brought in? There's a number of things that we look at. Then we have two different appraisals done for a purchase, and we have one appraisal done for a refinance. So it's things like that that we do all of that to make sure that you are absolutely safe in purchasing that property. We don't cut any corners. We're not going to close before we get all the answers to that, nor in most cases, from Mexican compliance, they do not allow you to close before then. So you just want to be careful if somebody says, hey, I can close a loan in 30 days or something like that. It usually means that there's some kind of contract written behind the scenes and you put up a lot of money up front, which in turn, that money is really not safe.
Mhm.